After spending 3 weeks in Thailand, it was time for us to move on to the southeast. Next were 4 countries we hadn't been before, and we had just enough time for a taste of each one. Things were about to speed up as we headed in the direction of the final destination of the 40 to 40 trip. In Southeast Asia, and to the southeast of Asia, there's always more to see. While you can't really say you've visited a country if you've only been there for a few days, I can say that we visited some places. The first place was Kuala Lumpur. After weeks spent riding in boats and the backs of trucks in comparatively rural Thailand, going to Kuala Lumpur brought us back to the city life. It felt like every direction we looked we saw new and exciting tropical fruit, street art, or architecture. One of the things we both found impressive was the diversity of cultures found in the city. We stayed in an Indian neighborhood and sipped chai as we walked to Malay restaurants through Chinese markets. Really, it's all of the world's best cuisines in one place. That said, I'll admit that a lot of the things we did in Kuala Lumpur were city activities, going to the top of towers, visiting aquariums, and the like. We're both suckers for a nice fish tank, and while I admit that they look nice swimming next to you in 4K, I do find myself wishing I'd filmed more of the culture and the society in the brief time I was there. With a certain reluctance and a growing interest in Malaysia, we moved on to Singapore. I'd always categorized Singapore similarly to Hong Kong, but while Hong Kong exudes a certain faded grandeur, Singapore is rich now, prosperous now. This is immediately obvious from the second you land at the airport. Everything is fancy, everything is new, everything is worth looking at. Perhaps as a result of this, all that we could afford to stay in Singapore was a small capsule hotel, a far cry from our penthouse suite in Kuala Lumpur. That said, sleeping in a box has its charms. One of these charms would definitely be air conditioning. I have never been hotter in a city than I was in Singapore. We spend our time there touring botanical gardens and walking around downtown, trying not to destroy our trip's budget. I can't imagine there exists in the world a more impressive set of greenhouses than the gardens by the bay in Singapore. If you like plants, that's your place. They're pretty expensive to visit, but with Singapore being essentially on the equator, entering these greenhouses gives you a novel experience. It's cooler than outside due to air conditioning. There's probably no shortage of amazing things to do in Singapore, and we'd like to go back, just as soon as we put out the fires in our wallets. After economically limping out of Singapore, our next location was the Indonesian island of Bali. I fully understand, and understood at the time, that Bali is not the perfect incarnation of Indonesian culture. However, it's a backpacker mecca, so we gotta go. There's a bit of an attitude in the backpacking community that suggests you should skip popular locations in search of hidden gems. While we've definitely traveled that way before, sometimes places are popular for a reason, and so it is with Bali. Bali is definitely a dip back into banana pancake Asia, full of tropical storms, fruity drinks, and interesting things to do and see.
Okay.
Probably our most memorable day in Bali was spent walking around the rice terraces. Every direction you look, you see something you'd like to have as your computer desktop. It was brilliant. We spent a relaxing week there, engaging in some tourist staples like craft beer and smoothie bowls before getting ready for our next big remove. This, however, is where our trip ran into real adversity for the first time, as our overnight flight to Sydney was suddenly cancelled. As a result, we lost one of our days in Australia and only really got to Melbourne at about 3 o'clock in the morning. From there, we continued on to Sydney. We arrived in Sydney thoroughly exhausted and set about enjoying the sights we could find in the town in the short time we had there. Thankfully, our hostel was in a prime location.
Made it into a cave. Previously, I had a million pairs of underwear hanging here to dry. But yeah, this is the bunk that I ganked after having to sleep up there. It sucked. Doug's up there now. This is the rooftop balcony, which is pretty rad. Actually, in Sydney, proof right there, have so many pictures of the ridiculous opera house.
What little of Sydney we were able to see had great appeal, but perhaps nothing so much as the Taronga Zoo. After taking a ferry past the Opera House, we were suddenly plunged into a world of fantasy animals, the kind of things you saw in picture books when you were a kid and didn't fully believe. It's one thing to be intellectually aware of the platypus, but when you see it with your eyes, your brain doesn't really believe what you're seeing. The same could probably be said about the flying foxes, which we spent about an hour and a half trying to photograph with varying degrees of success. What strange creatures! Ultimately, we didn't have nearly enough time in Sydney, but I had enough time to mess around a little.
Baby.
There was only one place left to go, and we'd been waiting to get back there for 11 years. Join us, won't you?